Good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's APM webinar. I'm delighted that everyone can join us. My name's Robert Allen, and I'm the APM Branches Manager, and myself and James will be your hosts today. It's great to see so many people joining us today, and I hope everyone's well. Please be aware that this webinar is being recorded, and you are currently on listen-only mode. That's not to say we don't want your interaction. Please find the question function within your control panel. Please submit your questions throughout the presentation. Chris, Temi, James, etc. will be more than happy to answer them at the end. If you have a question directed at one person in particular, if you could mention that in your question, that would be great. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all the volunteers from the London branch who have made this webinar happen. So on that note, I'll pass over to James.
Thanks, Rob. So thank you very much, and thank you for attending our session this evening. Just go through here. So firstly, we want to welcome you from the London branch. The main issue that obviously things have changed with COVID, and we've decided to bring up on the webinars and try and derive systems and events through this method, as well as in conjunction with the APM. So just I wanted to give some branch updates, and then we'll update. Introduce you to Temi and Chris. So firstly, we have a new confirmed committee. That's gone through the adjudication process, and we'll look to update you with that team probably at our next event. We've got up and coming events on webinars, which are going to be drones in project management, change with pro-ski methodology. There's going to be something around diabetes, and we're looking to do cybersecurity. My understanding is we, as a London branch, won't be doing any live events until probably at least January, but we're obviously just assessing what's going on. So more importantly, I'd like to introduce you to Chris and to Temi. So thank you very much for speaking for us both. I'm quite personally excited about this. I've personally been in the program world for at least 3 years, and having seen the slide deck, it really sort of shows up some really interesting topics and core principles of program management. We'd be really useful to understand any of your questions. We'd like to make it a really useful Q&A panel period. I don't actually mind going on slightly longer than the time if that works as well. So please chuck in the questions, and we'll then we'll look at them at the end of the Q&A panel. So over to you, Chris. If you'd like to introduce yourself and then start with the presentation.
Thank you, James. So I'm Chris Ctori. I am an Executive Director at the Nichols Group. I've got over 25 years experience in managing and working on complex programs. The last 11 years have been with Nichols, during which time I have worked on some of the most strategically important infrastructure programs, such as BAE systems on the Trident renewal program, a few at Network Rail, Crossrail, High Speed 2 Limited, Sellafield, and currently I'm working on the Palace of Westminster restoration and renewal program. Prior to joining Nichols, I was a program manager at Heathrow Airport Limited, and I worked on programs such as Terminal 2, and also I was director of projects at Terminal 3. I am a chartered project professional and a fellow of the APM, and also I was an MSP practitioner, but I think it's probably lapsed now, so need to refresh that. So that's me. Temi, would you like to introduce yourself before I start the presentation?
Yeah, that's fine. So good evening, everyone. I am Temi Afolabi. I am a mechanical engineer by background. I've worked on rail infrastructure for the last 10 years. And during that period, I've gone back to study further to improve my skills and my knowledge and my exposure. I've done an MSc in construction management. And more recently, I studied an exec MBA from Cranfield School of Management. I work with the Nichols Group. And over the past years, I've worked in several infrastructure programs in the UK and with various clients. And at the moment, I'm working with Crossrail, the famous Crossrail program. where I am responsible for systems integration and testing and commissioning. So thank you.
Thank you, Temi. Okay, so I'm going to start the presentation, and then we're going to do a segue and then hand over to Temi. So I'm going to start by asking a basic question, and that is, what defines a program? Well, the Managing Successful Programs defines it as a temporary, flexible organization created to coordinate a set of related projects in order to deliver outcomes and benefits related to the organization's strategic objectives. MSP then goes on to establish 7 principles, and these are: remaining aligned with corporate strategy, leading change, envisioning and communicating a better future, focusing on the benefits and threats to them, adding value, designing and delivering a coherent capability, experience. Fit with are likely to have a lifespan span over decades. How do you keep a complex program on track to deliver its stated outcomes on time? I will focus on some principles which I think are the essence of a program's success. So the first thing to say is programs by nature are complex in many ways. Our program is organized, interdependencies, the best strategies to deliver a successful outcome, stakeholder relations, interrelated project, and program risks are all require careful consideration. Many organizations will focus on a few critical elements of a program, which may be an area within their comfort zone. For example, the number of clients responsible for delivering major infrastructure programs tend to focus on scheduling and resourcing and hope that everything else will just fall into place. To be successful, however, programs require exponential levels of effort, people, processes, and systems. This effort is required in all program and project management disciplines in order to maintain their course. Programs are complex because of the number of interactions between projects and between levels of organizations, and interdependencies are often overlooked as the focus tends to be on progressing the projects inside the program. A complex program therefore needs to be guided, nurtured, and managed so that it has every opportunity to succeed. This is best achieved by proper planning at the program's initiation. Programs must focus early on developing effective program strategies such as stakeholder management, design and delivery, commercial, performance monitoring, and operational integration, and lock these down very early on in a program. Many programs fail due to a lack of cohesive strategies, leading to at best misinterpretation of the intended approach, or worse, the adoption of competing strategies by project teams within the program, the outcome of which is often chaotic. A crucial component in supporting the finalization and communication of program strategies is a comprehensive suite of program management plans. Now, these should be clearly and succinctly drafted so that they engage the wider program. The style should be journalistic and professionally presented, which makes the embedding of the strategies within the program a far easier task. And I'd just like to highlight that you've got to remember the difference between a strategy and a plan. And so many times, and even on the programs I'm working on at the moment, people, you know, they confuse the two or use one to mean the other. It's always better to agree the strategy before you develop the plan. In terms of critical skills, I would suggest that 2 are important. In a complex environment, keep solutions simple. Overcomplicating just adds to the complexity. Softer skills are very important. Having a focus on outcomes is not as black and white as being output focused, which is what a project manager must be. Flexibility, agility, not being afraid of change are necessary attributes required by program leaders. So speaking of leaders, that's my next point. Leadership is key. A program mentality is not just a project mentality on a bigger scale. Program leaders require a repertoire of leadership skills and must select the appropriate leadership style to deal with the situation at hand. Good leaders know when to listen. Good leaders know when to listen to their teams to get to the nub of the issue, and when to block out background noise that could derail a program. A leader will impose their style, which in turn will promote certain behavior. So the selection of the right program leader is fundamental to its success. Different management styles are often required at different stages of a program, and so it's not uncommon to change a leader as the program develops. Organizations that plan for changes in leadership will find it easier to control the program as it transitions from initiation through design, procure, delivery, and ultimately handover. The program leader will need competent leaders throughout the program organization. They are not necessarily a carbon copy of the leader himself. In fact, it helps to have a balance of management styles within a team. Team selection is therefore an important factor in ensuring that the team dynamics function effectively. So, a program leader reflects the program values and what they intend to deliver via program vision. This is not just a collection of words and should not be taken lightly as a tick box exercise, as some client organizations often tend to do. The individuals within a program organization have to believe they can implement their leader's vision. And I've put three images on my presentation. And I did a similar presentation about 2.5 years ago. So this isn't something I've been thinking of doing now because of what's happening in the world. I honestly believe that these particular individuals have a very, very good leadership style and also are very visionary. And one of the things that you need to consider is leaders often come to the fore in times of adversity. I'm not suggesting for one moment that program managers or program directors are, similar in terms of their leadership to the individuals that you see on the screen. But there are cases where many programs often hit adverse situations, and it's then that leaders show their true strengths. A key behavioral trait that is also necessary for a program is collaboration. No one person can be a driving force for a program, which is often the case for a project. Therefore, individuals have to work together and support each other for the program to succeed. So, are we delivering what we said we would, and are we doing it safely, on time, and within budget? These are the questions that vex every program. It is never easy to understand program progress, as it is heavily dependent on so many independent factors, as well as the accuracy and timeliness of progress reporting. Point of reference provided by a program baseline is a fundamental tool for integrating program scope, cost, time, and risk, and providing a consistent view from which change can be properly managed. The timing of when to strike a baseline is as important as the content. Too early within the development of a program and the data available will be insufficiently mature to properly inform the baseline. Too late, and you will not be able to monitor progress and make timely decisions to keep the program on track. Creating a baseline for a program can take a significant level of effort and is often not fully understood by clients who therefore do not make its creation a priority. A program baseline is the foundation for setting project budgets. It's also a foundation for change management, contingency drawdown, progress reporting, and informing governance. And the importance of a baseline should not be taken lightly by a client organization. It's never easy to understand program progress as it is heavily dependent on so many interdependent factors, as well as the accuracy and timeliness, of progress reporting. Set up a slick reporting cycle to provide appropriate time and timely management information. Make sure the information is clear and accurate and readily digestible so that it can inform good decision making. And don't be afraid to give bad news as soon as you can, so it can be managed and mitigated. It's never easy, but thinking about possible solutions will make the message more palatable. Once the program is established, setting up proper governance arrangements will enable efficient and informed decisions to be executed effectively. It can be argued that within a program environment, no one person has overall accountability for successfully delivering a program, which implies that proper delegated governance is a key function in maintaining order. We have established that programs are complicated, so clear governance is important. Otherwise, decision-making will become cumbersome, which will stagnate the program. Balancing authority between core delivery teams and a more central function that looks across the entire program is a delicate process which can make or break a program. It is also important to recognise how to transfer authority seamlessly when moving from one program phase to another. For example, when the critical mass of a program moves from design to delivery or delivery through to business integration. The role of the Program Management Office is important in establishing and maintaining program governance and linking it with performance. The PMO acts independently from the delivery teams and is well positioned to provide checks and balances by effective reporting and auditing of performance and governance. Programs are often diverse with widespread locations of project teams. Hence, for any program, regular communication of decisions and progress is not easy. But when done well and on a regular basis, it provides consistent messages within and external to a program. Communicating consistent messages up, down, and across the program costs little to produce and is worth so much in keeping individuals informed. Programs need to balance the need to communicate an accurate reflection of the state of the program in such a way that it is not seen as appropriately negative. It is essential to work with and through the program's organisation so that the messages are joined up. Everyone understands where we are going and why and how far along we are. Okay, so if I was going to distill my thoughts on what makes a good program or what makes a program successful, I would say it is mostly about leadership. Good leadership at the onset of a program, during the program, and at the end of the program is essential. Everything else is required, but if you don't get the leadership right, then the chances are the program will fail. So now I'm just going to hand back over to James, and I'll just put the slide up for you, James, there to talk to.
Thank you, Chris. So thanks for that, Chris. Again, we've not got any questions yet, so if you have any questions during this about the presentation, or even just questions on program management, please fire them in. It would be good to have them ready and waiting for the Q&A. So this is a segue, and we've also got Chris Beach from the program, who I think is the co-chair from the Program Management SIG. This here was a slide that was developed Chris was telling me in 2019 for the Program SIG conference that they did. And what they did is they surveyed the attendees about impact versus difficulty on the key subjects. This felt really important because when we looked at this pre the webinar, we just found a lot of the points and the themes that were running through the presentation were key and probably the more challenged areas. So we talk about the impact on success and difficulty. And for me, just seeing this, the collaborative behaviours, the benefit management and realisation management, and stakeholder governance. And so it just, having worked on some programmes, these core bits up here really, for me, outline a key high-performing programme, and will then see the right delivery and benefits released from that programme. So this here was about just showing some key things we thought that was assessed by the program management community, the SIG. So please obviously go and use their stuff, and we'll talk about Chris Beach later. And we'll also hand over now to Temi. So Temi's your part of the presentation. So
okay, thank you. So good evening, everyone, and thank you, James, for the introduction. It's a great opportunity to be here today, although it's virtually, so I can't see everyone, and it's a bit of a very tricky one presenting virtually. I've never done this before, so as I said earlier on, I am Temi Afolabi. If I haven't met you before, we're now friends. So if I fall off my chair tonight, don't laugh at me, considering that we're not friends. And just as friends, I recalled when I introduced myself earlier, I think it's worth just telling you a little bit about myself as well, just the personal side of it. So I am happily married. I got married 2 years ago, and I have a son, Jeremiah, who's 1. He's an absolute delight, and I'm learning every day about him. And it's great to be here today actually to talk about the essence of successful programs. So just as I move on yes, okay, sorry. Okay, yeah. So over the last 10 years, I've been heavily involved in delivering various aspects of projects and programs. I'm developing business cases, and now I'm doing testing and commissioning, systems integration, procurement. I've been involved in commercial management as well. I've also been involved in trying to, as working as a consultant, you've got to win business. I've been involved in winning business and securing new contracts, tenders, and all the rest of it. So in the last 10 years, actually, I've seen almost, I've kind of seen everything from top to bottom, and I've seen I've had lots of experience, and I would like to share some of those experiences today. Now, just looking at the UK at the moment, we have 3 significant challenges that faces the UK right now. So we have COVID-19, and I do empathize with everyone, by the way, who have been impacted by the ongoing economic challenge, the COVID-19. I really do empathize with you because we're living in very difficult times. But apart from COVID-19, we've got the looming recession as well, and then we've got climate change. I think there's a significant big challenges, and aside from those 3, we've got Brexit as well, which is just looming behind. So with all of this, the UK economy has suffered a great deal. And this is leading to lots of uncertainty, obviously with the COVID-19, which has claimed so many lives and reduced economic activity. And due to that reduction, both business confidence and consumer confidence is dropped significantly. When I did a research recently, according to the OECD and the Bank of England, their forecast at the moment is that Brexit and COVID-19, coupled with a number of other emerging challenges I've talked about, is having a significant strain on the UK economy. And as a result of that, we've seen a shrink in the UK economy by 11.5% in 2020 due to the lockdown imposed early in March. Just at the end of March. Now, with all of this, we've seen the government increase government spending, government investment to help stimulate economic growth. And I personally welcome the infrastructure investment, actually. The 250 billion injection into the economy as part of a wider initiative to help speed up delivery of construction projects, which involves a number of schools, hospitals, roads, highways, railways. I think it's a great opportunity for us as projects and program professionals. Further recent publishings also reveal that the government's plan to invest up to 37 billion in infrastructure work over the next year as well. So it's a procurement pipeline at the moment to boost economic activity that was revealed by the National Infrastructure Commission. And I think all of this comes at a moment where the UK requires such level of investment in infrastructure. But I would like to say as well that this level of investment, including the current economic challenges that we face, required a thorough rethinking on how we deliver infrastructure projects. And the question I've asked myself over and over again is, how do we ensure successful delivery of projects and programs? And with all of this, I think there is an urgent appraisal to quickly reassess the methodology behind delivering infrastructure projects and programs, with emphasis on the strategic role of leadership. So some of the things Chris talked about, and I'm going to talk about some of these as I progress through today. Whilst I was preparing for this session today, I kind of reminded myself on some of the things I learned when I was doing my MSc. And it was a concept that was developed by Sir John Egan in the 1990s, which was tagged Rethinking Construction. And in that paper, Rethinking Construction, by the construction workforce, John Egan came up with 5 key drivers that were identified as key components to set the agenda for the construction industry. And I think the same thing applies to the project and program industry as well, and we as professionals. It talks about committed leadership, focus on the customer, integrated teams and processes, quality-driven agenda, and competent people as well. Now, let's not kid ourselves. These 5 key principles are actually still very, very much applicable to the current day, looking at the current challenges that we face. And I believe as we move forward that these 5 key drivers will be critical actually, to how we deliver government infrastructure projects and to help stimulate the UK economy as well. Now, it's important to note that the effective and efficient delivery of projects and programs is intrinsically linked to better prospects for the economy. In the area of productivity, creation of jobs, investor and stakeholder confidence on major projects, and it also leads to favorable outcome for the economy. I strongly believe that the UK sector needs to step up, particularly we as project and program professionals. We need to step up to the plate now and address the long-term outstanding issues that we continue to encounter on major programs, the major setbacks that we continue to see. So just as I proceed today, that was just an opener just to give you some context. I would like you to walk away with 3 key messages today. And I'm going to hone in on these 3 key messages as we progress through the course of today. In the next few minutes, I'm going to speak. Number 1, and I think Chris talked about this, number 1, in the time of crisis and in the time of major industry challenges, leaders emerge and they create a strategic shift. Number 2, if we as project and program professionals, if we prepare well enough today and do our ultimate best to ensure that we are delivering successful programs, then we would not have to prepare, we would not have to start preparing tomorrow. The way we start preparing to set up projects and programs and we put robust strategies in place means we don't have to start repairing when projects overrun or when cost escalates or we have poor quality outputs and all the major challenges that we faced on these major projects and programs. And the third aspect is competent people, empowered people are the driving force behind successful delivery of programs. So those are the 3 key things I want us to I would hone in on today, and I want us to consider as I progress through in the discussion today. Now, we've all heard about the terminology that projects are people or people are projects. And I believe that successful delivery of projects are fully anchored by and delivered by real people. Now, when I talk about real people, I talk about relationship, building robust relationship, equipping people, having a positive attitude, and great leadership as well. So some of the things Chris has talked about. And when I talk about real people, I think we all have a key role to play in this actually. I have a role to play in there. Chris has a role to play. James has a role to play. We all have a role to play in this. And I want to talk about 5 key concepts actually. So the first one is ensuring economically viable, efficient delivery of projects and programs, i.e., not just we as obviously clients, organization, and even we, the supply chain as well, and everyone, we have to invest in the right thing at the right time and delivering efficiently as well. Efficiency of delivery is extremely key. The second concept is the fact that we have to promote responsible delivery, and that comes by instilling a culture of integrity and discipline actually to ensure sustainable and reliable outcomes on projects and programs. The third aspect that links into the concept of people or projects of people is we've got to bounce back from below standard performance on delivery of major projects. We just have to bounce back from it. It's pretty poor, I would say, at the moment on some of the projects and programs I've worked on or some of the things I've experienced. we need to ensure a clear understanding of context. And this is really important actually in the project environment or program environment, because we do have external influence that has a major impact on how we deliver projects successfully. When we talk, and when I talk about external influence, I talk about political, economical, sociological, technological, legal, environmental frameworks and factors that have a significant detriment on projects. And if we combine all of this together, it does have a negative impact on projects. And these are things that we have to consider. Now, the fifth aspect of that is we've got to ensure that the current investment that the government is investing into infrastructure, we've got to ensure that the current opportunity is not actually wasted. I see this as an opportunity to do things differently. That is, we've got to deliver projects more faster. We've got to be more effective in terms of how we deliver. But most importantly, we've got to avoid cost escalation, which is a disaster on major projects today. The cost just goes up, and it keeps rising. And we've got to avoid that. So I want to share my own personal story, actually. Sorry, this slide keeps... Okay. Sorry. This is a learning journey, by the way. So I want to share my own personal story. This is a quote from Viktor Frankl, and it says that everything can be taken from man but one thing, the last of human freedoms. To choose is one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. That is to say, we can choose how we decide to lead as project professionals on delivering projects and programs. So I'll give you an example of the good and the ugly. I worked on a project where I was able to set the tone in terms of what good actually looks like, where I was able to bring individuals together collectively to actually say, how are we going to deliver this? And in the first few weeks of this particular project, which I can't mention, we actually set aside a framework and we came together to understand how are we going to work collectively together? What key principles are we going to abide by? How are we going to manage risk? How are we going to ensure consistency of approach? How are we going to ensure the frameworks, the governance structures that we are implementing are robust enough to ensure successful outcomes? And these are something I worked together with the project team where I was a project lead to sort of create and to implement. And let's not kid ourselves, this is not me singing my praise, but all of this, setting up a robust success at the beginning and defining what success looks like, but also instilling a sense of discipline led to great outcomes. Now, when I talk about sense of discipline, I was very at the forefront of actually policing and actually ensuring that people are abiding by the principles that we're working with. And I remember at the time, when it comes to a situation and when we've got a personal issue, I addressed it straight on, and I recall having encounters with two particular individuals that we just had to call it quit because it wasn't working, and it was a negative vibe for the project environment. Now, these are things that we've got to consider. On the other hand, I worked on a project that the cost was escalating. The contractual relationship between ourselves and the other delivery agents meant the fact that they were only concerned about a particular scope or particular activity, and we're not looking at the whole in terms of actually how are we going to deliver successfully. But putting my foot on the ground and saying, actually, we've got to do the right thing. We've got to get to a point where we're achieving successful outcomes. Now, that might not land too well with people sometimes. And this is where you've got to think about, we've got to, as project professionals, we've got to think about what good looks like. It was unfortunate that that relationship didn't work quite well. But I had the ability to actually say, actually, I have the human freedom to decide this is what good looks like, and that's what I'm going to focus on. So that's just some just personal story I would like to share with you this evening. So moving on from that, when we look at the project and program environment, there are 3 dimensions and to look at. And the project environment is quite dynamic. There is the issue around the rate of change, there is complexity, and then there is also uncertainty as well. And the question I've often asked myself is, how do you thrive in a dynamic environment, and how do you create impact where the rate of change could either be positive or negative, and it could have effects on the project, where there are internal governance structures that adds additional layer of complexity to successful delivery of programs? Or is it a third aspect around uncertainty, where lack of coherency, lack of clear communication? So Chris spoke extensively about communication, including having a strategic direction has a massive impact on how projects are delivered. And not having all of this in place, uncertainty, not providing strategic direction in terms of what's the direction of travel, all of this leaves people in a land of limbo, or to just interpret things, or to work out actually, okay, what does this mean? And as I said earlier on, the question I've often asked myself is, so how do you thrive in a dynamic environment, and how do you create real impact? So now I'm going to talk about how environment affects successful programs. So building on John Egan's principles I talked about earlier on about the dimensions to be examined on projects and programs. And this. So it's very difficult to achieve successful outcomes with where there is strategic direction, there is alignment, and there is commitment from everyone. When I talk about commitment, commitment starts from above and it flows all the way through to the bottom. Leaders can never afford to sit back and let someone else do the thinking for them. The beauty of leadership is setting the tone in terms of what excellence actually looks like, setting the tone for positive impact, and ensuring positive influence on project and program organizations. The second concept is about people. So people are the champions behind successful delivery of projects and programs. And it's very difficult for people to succeed in an environment where leaders refuse to empower others and leaders refuse to create direction for people as well. And I think as we are moving and looking at the world of projects and programs as well, I said earlier on that projects are people. And it's really essential that we restore the human touch into people management in order to inspire a mindset of passion, innovation, and growth on projects and programs. The third aspect I want to talk about there, which is the organizational culture, which is actually really key. And it's very difficult to succeed in an environment where culture overwhelms strategy. We've all heard about the terminology, culture eats strategy for breakfast. It's therefore really essential that we ensure a disciplined outtake, and more importantly, positive values and behaviors are really, really key to ensure contribution to successful delivery of projects and greater outcomes as well. I am okay. So just moving on, I would like to talk about the blind drift into failure, which is something I've seen occur quite a lot on major projects. So when I talk about the blind drift into failure, we've got to avoid the blind drift on projects and programs. And we need to recognize that we don't get caught up in the drift, but we've got to rise above the drift. And we've got to go above and beyond the drift. to ensure that we can use creativity, innovation, and to use all of this to help to shape how projects are delivered. Now, when it comes to drift, it occurs in small steps. So when you look at major projects and programs, it's like there's a drift that occurs and it takes just gradual steps. And all of these small steps leads to a chain of events, leading to larger failures. And people often get customized with the uncertainties, with the bad behaviors and complex systems and so much more that has impact on projects and programs. Now, in view of this, I want to talk about three key concepts. The first one being the normalization of deviance. And it's basically a term that describes the process in which organizations actually differ, or project environments differ from acceptable standards in terms of what's the norm. And they create a new normal within the project environment. Now, project and program organizations, I strongly believe, need to avoid the subtle drift into deviance by ensuring strategic step change, clear leadership, identifying change agents who are empowered to enact strategic change, including robust governance structure, robust management frameworks, processes, procedures, and all of this would ensure successful outcomes. Now, the next one is the active inertia trap. And when you look at the diagram I've got here, so when you look at a project environment, the active inertia trap is kind of being stuck in the modes of thinking or working practices or things that have brought success in the past, or the initial success formula that's become a trap, where processes become dogmas, procedures, principles, and things that have been set in place have not been reviewed. Governance structures that have been set in place have not been reviewed if they're still relevant to the current environment that we are working on as the project moves from one phase or shifts from one phase to the other. So, and I strongly believe that there is a real need to understand context, particularly when it comes to major projects and programs. Understand context in terms of how do you shape your project environment and how do you ensure that you're not drifting into that failure and you don't fall into that active inertial trap. The next step I'll talk about is the problem of problems. So wicked, tame, and critical problems. And this leads me to something I've always talked about, which is there's a real need to understand context. And when I say understanding context, it's actually, well, what's the real problem? Because if you're able to define the problem, you almost have a solution. And recently I've seen or I've experienced people using the wrong approach to dealing with a particular problem. And not following the right principle means actually we don't get a successful outcome. And that's one thing that we've got to consider critically. And when we talk about tame problems, for example, these are complicated but solvable problems. And wicked problems are complex and ambiguous. Critical problems are problems that are urgent and very procedural. Now, I've seen a world of projects where there is a different approach that is adopted to each of these category of problems I've talked about. And when we're not able to categorize or effectively understand how to deal with those challenges, it all leads into the blind drift into failure. So the lesson I've learned particularly actually is that how you frame problems in the project environment really counts, and it determines your ability to navigate through complexities as well. Now, perspective is everything. The way we see things makes a huge difference. You know, sometimes I've always said to myself, it's not what you're looking at actually that matters, but it's what you see that counts. Certainty requires, number one, by playing a leadership, setting the standards in terms of what good looks like. The second one is adapting to the future by choosing to win through speed, agility, and flexibility as well. The third aspect is reserving the rights to play So when I talk about reserving the right to play, it's actually investing sufficiently and staying in the game, avoiding premature commitments. And this is where, both from leadership and also from those who are delivering, that's when it comes in as well. Commitment is absolutely key. And if we cannot be committed, then that means we can't ensure successful outcomes. Now, this is really key, actually. Not many people have positive attitude and behaviors on projects and programs, which means that we kind of lose the ability to engage, to understand emotions, to understand feelings, and to read intellectually into situations. And this is what emotional intelligence is all about. I want to share an anecdote very quickly, something I learned greatly from. And it's a saying. So an old Cherokee grandfather was telling his grandson a story. A fight is going on inside of me, he said, and it's a terrible fight between two wolves. One is evil, anger, envy, greed, resentment, lies, and ego. He continued, the other is good. He is joy, peace, sincerity, humility, kindness, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion. The two wolves are fighting to death. The boy asked his father, which wolf is going to win? The old Cherokee replied, the one you feed. So seriously consider what you're feeding. The moral of that story actually is we need positive thinking, emotional intelligence, and the ability to lead effectively to be able to deliver successful outcomes. I think there are lots of people with technical capability, knowledge, intelligence, but actually emotional intelligence is becoming really key because you can teach people how to deliver projects, you can teach people principles. So some of the principles, 7 principles Chris talked about earlier, those can be taught. But there is the aspect of emotional intelligence which requires you to actually really shape and build yourself as project professionals to ensure that we are delivering successful outcomes. So just as I wrap up, some key questions I would like us to ask ourselves as project professionals. Are you a door or wall? And I've seen in the world of projects and programs, and this is something that occurs very, very well. The first one, I can't be bothered with this egocentric. Really? These are things that are held. And as project professionals, I don't think we don't walk away from problems, but also we don't become part of the problems. We provide strategic direction. And when it comes to providing strategic direction, sometimes I think it's always better to actually, or it's wise to actually step out from the problem and assess things a little bit more objectively. I've personally seen on major programs or projects where there is always a tendency to use short-term thinking to solve major project challenges. And this often leads to short-term solutions, which isn't actually really sustainable. And it's like robbing Peter to pay Paul because you don't get successful outcomes. So the question we've got to ask ourselves is actually, are you a door or are you a wall? And the next concept actually is be a door and not a wall. And what that looks like is, so I agree with you, let's do it together. Oops, sorry about this. Let's do it together. Excellent strategy. Count me in. Let's make this work together. So for me, that's what good looks like. And just as I stepping outside of the world of projects and programs, just a couple of more minutes actually. I looked into the banking sector recently, and I recall reading an article about the cultural issues alongside a number of other challenges in terms of managing conflict, transparency issues, which contributed to the global financial crisis in 2008, and that's for the banking sector. So for us as project professionals and experienced individuals in infrastructure or whatever sector that we work in, I don't think we want to experience a major setback on how we deliver projects. So therefore, I think if we begin to hone in on having the right people with the right mindset, common goals, clear leadership framework, clear leadership structure, clear accountability, I think we'll begin to see successful and better outcomes on projects. I strongly believe that there has to be a realignment of how individuals are placed, how individuals are selected, how leadership teams are selected, how consultants, supply chain, and how they are brought together on major programs. Gone are the days where you select the biggest player in the league, Arsenal. But it's not just about that. It's about setting a tone for leadership. And it's about identifying a leadership team who would lead by example, building a strong team, promoting a positive and a winning culture. So I want to remind us of the 3 key messages I talked about when I started initially. And the first one is that in the time of crisis and major industry challenges, leaders emerge and create a strategic shift. And Chris has talked about this. The second concept is the fact that if we prepare well enough today, we would not have to repair tomorrow. The third concept that I talked about is competent and empowered people are the driving force behind successful delivery of programs. So therefore, to ensure that as projects and program professionals, to ensure successful delivery of projects and programs, we need to embed commitment top down. We need leaders who can share vision, who can hold people to account, and maintain a positive culture. We need to instill a real sense of discipline and integrity to ensure programs are delivered successfully. And I believe that that will shift and create a strategic shift, ensuring visionary leadership, focus on people, and ensuring a positive organizational culture as well. I strongly believe that with all of these principles, we will start seeing successful programs and greater outcomes as well. Thank you very much. And now we will take questions.
Thank you, Temi. Thank you very, very much, Temi and Chris. So I found that really, really powerful. You probably saw me. I've been writing notes just for various tunes that hit me while we were going through it. And your 3 points, Temi, about the leaders, robust strategies, and the competent people is, I think, for me, key, and how we drive successful programs, because having the wrong people or the wrong people driving the wrong things, or not having the right strategic management plans or processes or the way it's going on, I think has a massive impact. So I've got a number of questions. We'll do the Q&A for about 15-20 minutes, if that's all right. We'll just check how many people have gone off for a cup of cocoa or whatever. But I've got currently about 15 questions which I'll direct to you. So just another introduction, we have Chris Beach, who we mentioned earlier from the program SIG. So thank you, Chris, for joining the panel. What I forgot to mention, although some people have, is if you have a specific question to Temi, Chris Ctori or Chris Beach, please direct them, and we'll start at the top as it goes on. So go on, Chris Beach. Since you're new to the table, I'll give you the interesting first question that always comes with program management. When does a project stop being a project, and when does it become a program? There you go.
Well, I think for me, I think Chris touched on this in some of the first slides. Projects are very clearly about outputs, and programs are very much about capabilities and outcomes and benefits. So when your focus shifts beyond just delivering the core activities and the outputs, and you're thinking about the connection to business as usual activities, you're thinking about that transition into the operation and really changing the end goal, that's when you're starting to be a program rather than an individual project. And probably added to that, also when there's that greater uncertainty, again, that's been touched on by the presenters, if you're in that place where you don't quite know how the end goal is going to be achieved, then you're probably in a program, because that does evolve as you go through time. Whereas projects, normally you've got a fairly clear, defined output to achieve, you know how you're going to get there, and it's all about planning and controlling. Whereas programs become a lot more fluid.
Great, thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
So this one to Mr. Chris Ctori. Hi, Chris. Can you say a few words about leadership from the program team in relation to expectation from stakeholders and the customer?
Okay. So I do firmly believe, and I think it was mentioned earlier, that I think it was Temi who mentioned it. I used to work for BAA, so I do recall Sir John Egan standing up and talking about rethinking construction. Because he came from the manufacturing industry, it was very clear to him that the customer is key. And he brought into BAA a sense of thinking about the customer, even in construction, which wasn't quite there before. From a stakeholder perspective, the stakeholders, I think, are looking for the leader to listen to their views and ensure that they are considered. They may not have to be taken on board fully, but they need to be considered. And if they aren't going to be taken on board, then the leader needs to demonstrate why, not just say, I'm not taking your views on board. So I do think leaders do have a role to play in managing stakeholder expectations.
Thank you, Chris. Here we go, Temi. This one's an interesting one for you. So, hi all. I'm new to program management. Should program management benefits be amalgamation of the benefits of a project within it, or should the program have its own benefits to be realised?
So I think the program should have its own benefits to be realised, and those are things that you sort of provide at the outset, so that everyone is very, very clear, and there is a consistent message about the benefits and the outcomes that are to be delivered. One of the things I was going to touch on when I was speaking earlier, because I was cautious of time, is on the project I was referring to earlier on, which was a successful outcome actually, was we were very clear about the benefits and what we're looking to achieve from that particular phase of the project. So everyone was absolutely very clear and fully bought into the benefits and the outcomes that we're trying to achieve. So I think it's really essential to be very clear on that.
I mean, I'm just going to give you another further response to that. The benefits for a project can be very much the different benefits for a program. Yes, they're likely to align, but actually they're two different things. I would also say to that, right? So there might be minor benefits that are released, but actually there could be a different outcome. I suspect they probably do need to align, but they don't essentially need to be the same. I would probably say to that. We had a question about, just while we were talking about Egan again, is there slides for the Egan report? Does anyone know on the web or anything?
Yes, there is an Egan report online, which can be downloaded.
Do you know if there's any slides to it or anything like that, or is it just the report?
It's just a report.
Okay, thank you, Temi. So I'm trying to assess the question. So Chris Beach, is there a theme for causes of major failures of programs? If so, what are they?
Oh, that's an interesting one. So there's a lot of content around projects. I don't think there's as much because it's not as mature around programs and common causes. So if you go back to things like the OGC's common causes of project failure, I would say some of those are equally valid at a program level. So failures of governance, failure at a particular level of the program is breaking things down into component parts. Many times I come across projects that are really programs, and that's because people haven't worked through and decomposed the program into the respective projects and how they connect. So I would say a lot of the strategic work around common causes for project failure equally apply to programs most of the time.
Thank you, Chris. So Chris Ctori, this one's an interesting one for you. Without obviously revealing anything too sensitive, this is what personally has been the most painful lesson you've learned in program management?
Well, I'm always learning, but I would say, I mean, there've been a few, and going back to T5 was a great program, and seen as being an exemplar at the time on budget to time. It failed at the last hurdle when it wanted to integrate into operations, and I know that Crossrail is suffering from the same problems. But there was a public inquiry on T5 because it was delayed by 2 or 3 weeks, which I found quite amazing, quite frankly. But it just goes to show, you know, going back to an earlier question about the importance of customers, because it was about operational integration and passengers and airlines were put out. The government decided to hold a public inquiry. So you've got to think about, you know, the customer. And I don't think, and I will say this, I don't think all client organizations do. But recently, without mentioning any names, I do think, and this is maybe another difference between project and programs. So I focused on the softer skills of being really important in program management, because you are having to be agile, having to be flexible, and you are looking at an exponential level of complexity that you have to manage. But it is about ensuring that the benefits are realized. And I think time and time again within a program environment, if you get too many people who've got a project mentality in the senior roles within a program, then you're not going to get the outcomes that you want, because you're too focused on getting started with construction. You know, there's a rush to pour concrete rather than setting up the program and making sure that it's set up properly and that the benefits are realized. And I've seen that, you know, on some of the programs I've worked on, I have to say.
Thank you, Chris. Temi, what do you think current delivery why do you think current delivery standards are poor, and what are the key drivers in your opinion?
So some of the things that I've talked about actually kind of fit into this in terms of why delivery standards are really poor. And I'll go back into the concept I talked about around people, and this is really important actually. So I've seen as projects evolved through stages that people haven't evolved as well, and the different skill, capability, experience, and knowledge to transition through has not changed as the project evolves. And all of this obviously has had and continues to have a negative impact and additional layer of complexity on top of the programs. And that's why I said earlier on that it's really, really essential that both the leadership team, the client team, and everyone has got they've got to set the tone in terms of what good and what excellence actually looks like. And it's about ensuring that you've got the right people with the capability, with the skill set, the knowledge, and the experience required to help drive those outcomes or benefits that you're looking for. So that's the key thing for me.
Thank you, Temi. So there's a really interesting question which I'm going to add another layer of complexity on, and I'm going to give that to Chris Beach. So when working for a project within a program, it's easy to get lost in one's project issues and lose sight of the bigger picture at the program level. How can people working on projects effectively be up to date with all the issues happening in all the other projects within the program and at the programmer level? And effectively, do you have an experience of this? I'm going to go one further, and I remember posing this to Chris over a coffee about supply chains. So, for example, you will have, say, a client funder, then the client organisation that may be operating, then you might have then a delivery contractor, you might then have designers underneath that, and a supply chain. So talking about, you've got all these individual projects, but actually, just to make that more complicated, how do you make sure that vision is down the supply chain when you get this sort of battling different views on commercials and all these other things?
It's a challenge, and that's one of the key challenges within programs, that they're hugely complicated and have very long supply chains. There are many different engineering companies, consultants, advisors involved. You end up with this plethora of individuals, let alone the individual project managers of the component projects. And for me, and it's not always done particularly well, it is the role of that central program team to be the information hub and to make sure the messages are permeating throughout that network. I've seen some programs that do it very well, and they invest in that sort of central PMO or program team to coordinate that activity. Others that invest less heavily in that, and projects do drift apart and collide with each other where they overlap in either scope or delivery plans. But I would say I don't think there's a silver bullet to how you make that work. I think collaborative behaviours and embedding the philosophy of collaboration and the mechanisms that everybody is part of the programme, and making sure everyone's educated on all the other parts of the programme so they understand their place within it and how they connect and dovetail with all the other components. That network mapping and the collaborative functions, be it around sort of informal or formal networks and review sessions, are critical to make sure all that information flows in very complex environments.
And that's quite interesting, just to sort of join some of the dots that I heard on the presentation. You mentioned about the blind drift, Temi, and I'm not saying this is specifically that, but I hadn't thought about a PMO function in a program where their job could be to disseminate information and stop silo working. We tend to be very functional with PMOs and change and commercials and reporting and everything else. And I hadn't, but it's that strategy piece, isn't it? How am I going to stop silo thinking? I'm not saying that's the answer, but that's one answer. But your strategy, your question when you're talking about setting the right pillars up is how do you stop that? And that may be one thing, thinking about what you just mentioned there. So that, thank you. Chris, Ctori, another one question for you. Recognising good leadership is essential for success. What's your thoughts on what makes a good leadership development programme? You're solving the world's problems here, by the way, Jen, so just for the record.
So I go back to the three individuals I put down on my presentation and said that good leaders, whether it's he or she as a leader, need, if you're going to develop a program for leadership, you've got to talk about leadership styles, and there are different leadership styles. If you're a fan of Alex Ferguson, you can say he was a great leader. Other people might say, well, actually, he was quite a strong person, and he was quite dogmatic. But there is no question that he had a great record. But you have to choose your leadership style. So I would say that you need to think about the type of leader that you want to be, and make sure that it is appropriate in the situation you find yourself leading in. And you've got to be honest to say, actually, this doesn't fit with my value set, therefore I'm going to step away. Or you might say, actually, my value set is different, and I'm going to impose my value set on the program. So I can give you an example of that, if I may, because I was at an all-hands briefing last week, and for the Palace of Westminster Restoration and Renewal Programme. And this isn't commercially sensitive, but David Goldstone, who's the Delivery Authority Chief Exec, has just recently joined the programme. In fact, he only joined two or 3 weeks ago. And this was his first opportunity to speak to the people working on the program. And he thought it was important to him to set out what his values were. And these were as follows. He mentioned the word integrity. He mentioned realism. He said he wants evidence-based decision making, and he wants people to be realistic when they give, information, particularly on progress. He used the word collaboration, and he used the word transparency. And then he went on to say he wanted to create a culture of empowering our teams, and he wanted teams and individuals to identify issues early and work to resolve them in a no-blame culture, which is great. It was like, wow, yeah, well, if you're saying that right from day one, then it's something that most people on the program can say, yep, I agree with that. I want to follow this person. He's a true leader.
Great, thank you, Chris. So this is still really good. So we've still got 107 people in. I've still got like another 15 or 20 questions. Don't worry, we won't drive you hard, and I will stop it at some point. But the point is we've got you've got some attention of people, and so if you don't mind for now, I'll keep carrying on. So Temi, I'll go this one to you. How do you suggest we ensure the scopes of work and what successes look like are defined in enough detail to significantly reduce the escalating costs and extended programs? Leadership commonly is seen not to have the strength to follow early steps in development and then follow through defining outcomes and benefits. So I suppose the question there is, how do we define scopes of work and successes with short-term and long-term goals?
Yeah, so this is actually really key, and that's a great question actually, and it's one that continues to create on delivering projects on the subject of scope. And when scope isn't clear, or there's a scope creep, or there's a change of direction, obviously all of this has ripple effect on overall project delivery, on costs, time, and all the rest of it. And when it comes to scope, I think these are things that needs to be dealt with at the early stages, particularly design. Also, aside from design, taking into consideration systems integration and being very, very clear about who's managing what scope, who's in charge of delivering what scope. And where there is a scope change or additional scope that needs to be added, then that needs to be made very, very clear, and also have a robust framework on how that scope is going to be managed all the way through.
Thank you, Temi. So I'm going to go with two more questions, and then we will. Oh, sorry, go on, Chris.
I was going to say, can I just chip in on that? Because I think there's a slightly different angle on it. That yes, there is scope creep within projects and programs, but a lot of the time it's just reality playing out, that people start with too optimistic estimates at the front, possibly to get a business case approved and get the project going in the first place. But the robust challenge and scrutiny and use of benchmarks at the beginning can prevent some of that by starting with an achievable baseline budget or baseline delivery plan, rather than something everyone would hope to achieve, and then finding the cost goes up. So I think there's sort of two sides to that coin there. There's the control element that Temi's covered, but I think also really upfront clarity of how long does something take and how much is it going to cost. And not being people slightly deluding themselves into what can be achieved, I guess.
And here's a future question on that, and I've got some quite interesting exposure to this. And it relates to what you're saying there. So the question is, does the ultimate project leadership lie within project sponsor or the PM or program manager, as it might be here? Can leadership be taught, or is it an innate ability? That's an interesting statement or question. And so my question, just to develop that further, is, I know every role, for me, every role is key in a program, right? Be it the sponsor, the program manager, the delivery, the functions. But where the sponsorship for me is a key piece, which maybe is not as developed as maybe the project delivery function. And maybe the question probably to you, Chris, is how does sponsorship I'm making up my question as I'm thinking, but what's the role of the sponsor in terms of the program delivery? And that felt like a generic question, but I think you probably got where I was going.
Yeah, I think yes, I did. Well, the role of there are three things that the sponsor has to do, and I've been talking to the sponsor sponsorship within the APM, but equally I've been working as a sponsor for quite a number of programs recently, and I'm currently working to support the CEO of the sponsor body at Palace of Westminster with developing their organisation capability. Good sponsorship is about ensuring that requirements for the programme are set, and that you manage your key stakeholders and make sure that they are brought on board with what the programme wants to achieve in terms of outcomes. They tend to own the business case. And once all of that is set and you've initiated the programme and it's up and running, you hold delivery to account with checks and balances to ensure that what is being said is reflected in what is happening out there. So it's about setting the requirements, managing the stakeholders, and holding delivery to account to deliver to the plan that they say that we're going to deliver to. Now, things do change, and we need to have sponsors and deliverers who are agile and want to work together because effectively the outcome of a program, the goal of achieving a successful outcome, it's the same for the sponsor as it is for the deliverer.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris. So, Chris, we're going to close after this point that was made just to one of your points. You can do, if you want, you can do a 30-second sort of intro into the SIG or what you're doing or your online presence, and then we'll close maybe with Sharon if you're around, Sharon. So I'll just read this directly. In response to Chris Beach, IRE, when a project becomes a program, very few projects don't strive to deliver an outcome, which suggests that almost all projects and sorry, I think I misread that. An outcome which suggests that almost all projects are programs. I'm inclined to disagree. I think the main differentiator may be a multiple discrete projects that need to be coordinated together to deliver the desired outcome. If that made sense, because I read that incorrectly.
I think so, and I think it's a matter of how you structure things and how you decompose projects, and that's my point about a lot of projects, or what people would call a project is really a program, because it is delivering an outcome, whereas a true program will have a number of projects that deliver discrete outputs. So it might, let me think, well, I don't know, something like Terminal 5, going back to Chris's example, there will be projects in there that are enabling projects that might just be clearing the ground. They provide a cleared site, and then you've got some building projects that will build things. You'll have some systems projects that will fit those systems into the facility, and then you'll have other projects around training staff to operate that facility. Some of those deliver capabilities, so I would use the outcome slightly different. You will get a number of outputs from each of those projects. Some of those outputs will add up to a capability. You now have an ability to do something, and those things then lead to customer outcomes, like people can take flights. So that would be the outcome. An individual project doesn't lead to that outcome of people being able to take flights. And then the end benefit is revenues to the airlines, to the Heathrow organisation. Those outcomes become benefits. So you get this chain all the way through from outputs, capabilities, outcomes, and end benefits that are all connected, and projects playing at a different place within each of those. And some projects, it's correct, will deliver an outcome in its own right. If it's a standalone project, it can do that.
Great.
Do I get a chance to reply with the SIG then? Is that, can I bolt on?
Yeah. Give us a 30-second.
So for those that don't know, we do, within the APM, we have a number of specific interest groups. One of those is the Programme Management SIG, which I co-chair. We're just, like the London branch, got our new committee formed for the coming year, so that will be meeting soon. Our role, which is slightly different to the branches, is to develop and further the knowledge around programme management, to be able to share good practice between the members within the community, tap into those community members to develop new ways of thinking, share examples of what's working and what's not worked in their own programs, and generally connect across the membership. We do that through a number of work streams, and we've recently set up a focus group. So on the committee, we've got 12 core people that drive this. We're in the process of setting up a focus group to support that committee of up to about 50 people, experienced practitioners that will help contribute towards taking that practice further. And Sharon's joining in on that with us, which is great. So we're still looking for other people to come and join that focus group, but also a plea to just engage with the SIGs, engage with where you have inputs you can give. We have our Twitter groups and our LinkedIn groups, etc. Register on those and feed in and see some of the content around program management that other people are sharing.
Great, thank you, Chris. So I just want to say thank you, firstly, to Chris, Ctori and Temi for the presentations. For me, really informative, and actually it's given me some even food for thought for my day job, my personal stuff, and then the programs that I'm working within. So I'm certainly going to go and take away some thoughts about what I want to do. But I just want to say thank you, because hearing your experience and listening and teaching and taking the time to do it, it's been really, really, really appreciated. So thank you. I'm going to now leave to Sharon, not to do anything, but just to close. And thank you very much for attending this evening. Is that going to work?
I prepared the webcam, so all perfectly. Sorry about that. So thank you, and we echo that. Thank you for the preparation. Great to meet you guys. Serendipity brought us Chris Beach, so that's wonderful. Like Temi said, well, we are what we feed us. London Branch wanted to be known for its hot food. Obviously, that's not something that we can do now, but I won't keep you too long so that you can get some hot food. We do have a Twitter page, etc., like the program SIG, so feed us there. Also feed us with the survey that comes out. The survey will then help us drive those types of activities, fantastic events such as this one. We can only put on those when we know what it is that you want. James is going to keep me honest for the upcoming events that we talked about. The drones is starting to shape up for September now. We might be able to squeeze some things in during the August period. Typically for us as a branch, it's our summer holidays, different kind of circumstances this year. But we as a branch focus on higher education, the SME sector, obviously all of these continuing professional development events fed by that survey, and then we try to focus on the corporates. I do know that there's a program activity also going on the 16th of July, so feel free to join that one too, keep that conversation going. I think I've pretty much completed the things. In that survey, this is our first attempt at an evening spot. We've had quite a lot of branch and SIG and obviously APM HQ lunchtime sessions. So we wanted to know what you think about with an evening spot. Is it want more of it, less of it? Let us know what you think. We can only work for you. We're all volunteers in the same fashion. Thank you all very much again for the preparation for this evening, for joining us. Be safe, everybody. Good night. I'm not sure where else I could say to that. Thank you again.
Thanks, everyone.